Hello and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Stephen Cole. When lockdowns began last year, over 500 million people joined social media for the first time. Today on The Agenda, I'm asking whether or not these platforms have provided a real connection, or are they just making us lonelier than before? So coming up, I'll be speaking to the influencer who was admitted to rehabilitation because of her addiction to Instagram. We look at why girls are twice as likely as boys to suffer depressive symptoms as a result of social media consumption. And with trolling numbers on the rise, we ask whether or not people should be allowed to create anonymous accounts. Social media was supposed to connect the world and liberate its users. But for many, it's become addictive, punishing, and sometimes toxic. Since the start of the pandemic in January 2020, the number of social media users has grown by 490 million worldwide. This year, the world's social media users will spend a total of 3.7 trillion hours on sites like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. So why are we spending so much time on social media when it isn't always the healthiest option? Well, quite simply, it's designed to be addictive. We're hooked on approval, attention, retweets, shares, and likes. When little notifications ping up on our phones, they light up the reward centers of the brain. And when we don't get the numbers we were hoping for, we feel disappointed, let down. Humans are, after all, social animals who seek approval from peers. Most social media apps use intermittent variable rewards to keep users hooked. This system was designed to be like the highly addictive fruit machines in casinos. You pull a lever, you take a chance, and you get a hit of dopamine when you see something new. So, what is this time spent on social media doing to our brains? The UK-based Education Policy Institute says there is strong evidence that prolonged periods of social media use is linked to self-esteem issues in young teens, especially among girls. Their research shows that after the age of 14, a rising number of young girls are reporting feelings of depression and hopelessness. And it's no wonder when most of social media use is endless scrolling through other people's highlight reels. Other findings from the study show that the number of young people with probable mental illness has risen from 1 in 9 in 2017 to 1 in every 6 in 2021. During the pandemic, social media has been an important lifeline for millions of people wishing to stay in touch with family and friends. But as lockdown starts to lift and we venture outdoors again, it might be time to reassess our relationship with these applications. After all, they're not going to go away. In 2016, Bella Younger gained 75,000 followers overnight, shooting to fame as an influencer for her parody wellness account, Deliciously Stella. But that success soon started to take its toll as she became addicted to social media. Well, here with me to discuss that and much more is Bella, who joins me now. Bella, you've written a book about this experience called The Accidental Influencer: How My Need to Get Likes Nearly Ruined My Life. That's one of the longest titles for a book that I've seen for a while. But how did you become an accidental influencer?
I was never really the typical person who you'd imagine to become an influencer. You know, I'm not really interested in fashion or makeup or anything like that. And I had an Instagram account with about 300 followers. But I wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and I was doing a show and nobody knew who I was. So I started an Instagram account parodying girls who were very into health and wellness, and somehow it took off more than anything I'd ever done.
And how many times a day then were you checking your phone? Because 75,000 followers is a lot.
I would say it wasn't so much how many times a day I was checking my phone, it was when was I not looking at my phone. I was looking at my phone in bed, on the loo, at meal times, while in conversations, at work, just all the time. I barely ever put it down.
And although what started, I suppose, as a joke, then took its toll on you because you ended up in the clinic, didn't you, the Priory Clinic?
Yeah, massively. And when I was there, my doctors had never really encountered anything like it. They weren't aware that social media could be addictive in the same way as alcohol or drugs. And they just saw that I had a great career and that I needed to keep it going. And so it took a really long time for me to actually get better and find the root cause of what was going on.
When you say get better, were you helped by family or friends, or was it I mean, what were the clinic treating you for?
I was being treated for depression, anxiety, and bipolar. And they thought that I'd had a manic episode that had been brought on by the stress of everything that was going on. But they also thought that I should keep up with the Instagram because it was good for my career. It was an incredibly strange time, a difficult thing to manage.
What were the, shall we say, warning signs, do you think? I know this is after the fact, but when you were being treated and you examined your behaviour, I wonder what kind of signs there were, apart from your obviously picking up your phone 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, the phone, obviously, but I think mainly that how many likes or follows I got in a day would determine how well I perceived my day to be going. So if I posted something and it didn't get 1,000 likes within 10 minutes, that was my cutoff. I would decide that I was a failure and my career was over and that everybody hated me. And if I got that, I'd be like, okay, well, I'll live to post another day and everything will be okay.
Do you think social media is designed to be addictive?
I'm 100% certain it's designed to be addictive because the tech companies that own the social media, they make more money, the more time people spend on it. So the more dopamine that they're giving out through likes and follows and validation, the more time people are going to spend on their platforms.
Amongst your social group, are there others, or can you see that kind of addictive behaviour amongst your friends?
Totally, but more importantly, I can see it amongst fellow influencers. So if I go on certain people's accounts and I look at how often they're posting and what kind of content they're posting and what their engagement is, I can see patterns that I was definitely a part of, where you can just see the desperation to get to the point where they thought where they were succeeding. But because of the Instagram algorithm, there's no point in trying to cheat it. You can't work any harder or post any more frequently to get any more engagement, like it's predetermined.
So what kind of answer, you must have thought about it and your friends must have talked to you about it because you've come through this, but the knee-jerk reaction is always, more regulation, or should there be warnings, or should there be a lack of anonymity? I mean, what is the answer going forward to this?
I think that the best thing to do going forward would be to remove the like and follow buttons for at least under 18s. And it's really difficult to say, oh, we just shouldn't have it anymore because it's completely embedded in our culture and it's a really important tool for connection. But I think that we need to be a lot more open about what the warning signs are and give people tools for how to use social media safely. What
about during lockdown? Bella, was this exacerbated? What was your relationship with social media during lockdown? And what effect do you think lockdown had on social media followers?
I mean, I have no doubt that screen time went absolutely through the roof and everyone wanted to know what everyone else was getting up to because nobody had any sort of external stimulus at home. And my initial reaction was, okay, well, it's a public service that I must offer to entertain the nation while we are in lockdown. I started posting funny things and I started getting more likes and I started getting more follows and it felt good again. But I also recognized that I was falling back into unhealthy patterns.
I mean, are you part of the problem, Bella? You're an influencer.
Yeah, arguably. I think for a while I was part of the problem in that I made having lots of Instagram followers look like an incredibly fun thing to do. And it is, in many ways, very fun. I got invited to lots of parties and I got paid lots of money to do very silly things. But ultimately, I was unfulfilled and I was very unhappy. And I hope that by writing this book about the truth of what happened, people will understand that it isn't all fun and games and it's got quite a dark underbelly.
Bella Younger, many thanks to you for joining us here on The Agenda.
Thank you so much.
So that's the view from an influencer who became addicted during her adult life. But what about children joining social media in their early teens? Well, University College London published a study before the pandemic showing that 14-year-old girls are twice as likely to show depressive symptoms linked to social media use compared to boys of the same age. Now, leading that study was Professor Yvonne Kelly, who joins me now. Professor Kelly, can you tell me a little more about how you reached that conclusion?
Yeah, we looked at information on around 12,000 young people aged 14 years from a large study called the Millennium Cohort Study. And we looked at their answers to questions around feelings of depression. And we looked at that in relation to the amount of time that they spent on social media platforms. And we found a really clear, strong, graded relationship with the more time girls in particular were spending on social media platforms, correlated very strongly with depressive symptoms. We also saw an association or a relationship for boys, but it was less strong than it was for girls.
So the obvious question is, why are girls suffering more than boys? And is it only due to the length of time they're spending on social media, or are there other factors at work?
To my mind, it's about the content and the context of use. So I'll say what I mean by that. Content in terms of what young people are encountering is key. And girls were more likely to, for example, report feelings or experiences rather of being harassed or bullied online compared with boys. They were also more likely to be reporting problems around body image and their self-esteem. There are also impacts in terms of the context of use. So both girls and boys were more likely to be reporting poor sleep if they were using social media for extended hours.
And this study was published pre-pandemic. I can only imagine that it's got worse because teenagers will be spending more time online, perhaps, or be using more screen time?
Well, interestingly, it could go either way. During the pandemic, teenagers, and in fact, all of us, not just teenagers, were spending, a lot more time on social media platforms and connecting with each other via digital technology. So really, this could be a lifesaver, quite literally, for teenagers and for adults and older generations as well. So it's too early to tell whether there are links between social media, firstly, whether they are causal in relation to young people's mental health, because it could go the other way around. It could be that young people who are particularly vulnerable and have pre-existing poor mental health are more likely to go online and engage on social media websites. So that's one thing to think of. But also, because of the huge benefits of using social media platforms, for young people as well as for adults and older people, we really don't know whether the amount of time that that extended amount of time during the pandemic period has had negative impacts in and of itself on people's mental health.
I'm sure you're hoping this study will help inform us all on and about social media and perhaps change policy. In which case, what changes would you like to see, and who should be leading these changes? Governments, policymakers, parents, teachers?
There are many, many, many different policy settings that we could. So young people need to be able to navigate these online environments skillfully and know how to deal with negative content and negative experiences online. That's really, really key. There's a raft of things that people could do in terms of improving sleep, perhaps not having mobile devices in bedrooms, those sorts of things, so that one can have unbroken sleep and the temptation to check the mobile device is then removed if you don't have the phone in the bedroom.
One of the big problems with bullying and trolls online is anonymity. If there's less anonymity, perhaps there'd be less trolling.
We have to really work with social media organizations in order to have, a better degree of surveillance and monitoring around trolling and obnoxious behaviors online. Absolutely. It's all part and parcel of it. The government need to be involved in that for sure. But government also need to sort of pay attention to other structural things that are going on, harmful online content, which, that sort of often these commercially run social media platforms, young people can be bombarded by a variety of commercial content above and beyond their individual interactions that they're experiencing online. So I think an all-round look at that online environment, how it can be better regulated, is really key to this.
Professor Kelly, many thanks to you for joining us on The Agenda.
It's a pleasure.
Still to come here on The Agenda, could banning mobile phones in schools help tackle the problem of online trolling? Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to The Agenda. Social media hit the headlines for all the wrong reasons during the recent European Championships, when some of England's footballers received torrents of largely anonymous racist abuse online after missing penalties in the final. So, why is it so difficult to track down racist trolls, and what's it really like when you're targeted on social media? Well, I'm joined now by Charley Oliver-Holland, a victim of cyberbullying. Charley, what was your experience of cyberbullying?
So when I was younger, about 12, 13 years old, when I was in secondary school, I experienced cyberbullying, which was from people in my school environment, but also from others from outside of the school environment. I had like an Instagram page that was kind of private from people at school. So it was like sort of a safe space for me to like be myself. And people from school found this and then started to call me names because of it, because they found out about my sexuality, which I was kind of like private about.
And did you know who was calling you names, or were they anonymous?
I mean, sometimes, yeah, but everyone's got a username. So online you can be whoever you want to be, which was a good thing for me because I could be, you know, someone who I wasn't, or someone who I was that I didn't want to show in person. But also it's a bad thing because people can be, you know, anonymous and not show who they really are and show their true colours, and will say things that they would not have the nerve to say in real life.
We have a generational divide between you and I. I'm from a few generations along the road from you, and I would immediately react by saying, well, why don't you just log off?
I think there's a big thing of like a fear of missing out, and also a lot of things happen that you need your phone for. So like every day when we wake up in the morning, we use our phones for an alarm. We use our phones for, you know, reminders. Even in school, we have apps where we used to have our timetable on our phones. So I think it's really hard to sort of like disconnect from that. And also it's like, you know, if you were invited to a party and you didn't go, it's like social media is sort of a place where young people meet and engage. So I think it's quite hard sometimes to just switch off from that.
I mean, you can use your mobile phone, you can be connected, but you don't necessarily have to be connected on social media, do you?
No, and I think that there should be more education in schools around how young people can use their phones and use social media in a safe and positive way. Young people should be taught that it's okay to switch off, but also how to use social media safely and how the things that you can say online can come back and haunt you in the future.
There's a lot of talk, Charley, isn't there, about banning mobile phones from schools. Will that work?
I don't think they should have their phones taken away from them as such, but instead there'd be more education on how to safely use your phone. And also I think phones should be, unless told by a teacher otherwise, should be banned in the classroom, because that is a time to learn. And I think that sometimes phones can be a distraction. And I think that the school should take safety issues online more seriously, such as bullying and stuff. But I guess it's hard for them to monitor that as well. So it's quite a complex situation.
And what advice, Charley, would you give to young people regarding social media?
I think my number one piece of advice would be online, be yourself as much as possible. Don't try and be someone else for the likes and the follows, because it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important. I used to post, you know, selfies and take hours to edit them and try and get 300, 400 likes. But now if I go for a nice picnic with my friends, I'll post that instead, because the people who I want to hear about what I'm doing is my family and people who I care about. And if they want to, they don't want to see an edited photo of my face. They want to see fun that I'm having with my friends. So I think be yourself, and also don't say anything that you wouldn't say in real life. And if you are having problems with other people online, report it, because there's plenty of places you can report things to, even though the services do need improving for reporting bullying. But also just switch off. It's okay to switch off from social media. You can still have a good time. You can go out, have a walk, you can play games, you can do loads of other things without having to be on social media all the time.
That's great advice. Charley Oliver-Holland, many thanks to you for joining us here on The Agenda.
Thank you.
So we've heard about some of the social media struggles young people are experiencing and have experienced during the pandemic. But what about the long-term consequences? Joining me now is Dr. Maša Popovac, a psychology professor at the University of Buckingham, specialising in cyber aggression and bullying. So welcome, Maša. You published a study in 2017 which showed that 43% of adolescents in the UK experienced cyberbullying. That's a very high percentage. Is that still the case?
Yes, I did a follow-up study in early 2020 with 12 to 17-year-olds in the UK and found pretty much the same prevalence rate. So about 40% had experienced cyberbullying ever, and 1 in 4 had experienced cyberbullying in the past 12 months. So unfortunately, the figures are still very similar years later. And in fact, some of the research now that's coming out during the school closures as a result of COVID have found the same prevalence rates, and some studies have found an increase in cyberbullying at that time as well.
Are they linked, school closures and online trolling?
I think that a lot of the potentially face-to-face bullying that would have been happening may have transferred online, but I also think that the pandemic has caused a lot of frustration, anxiety, and uncertainty, and potentially people are displacing those feelings through aggression towards other people online.
And what about the long-term consequences? You tend to think cyberbullying is something very sadly teenagers experience, but hopefully as they grow out of their teenage years, it'll stop. But are there long-term consequences?
Yes, so of course the immediate effects are emotional reactions from that experience, but if left undetected without any interventional support from others, the long-term consequences are pretty dire. So it can impact somebody's self-concept and really wear somebody down, reduce self-esteem. It can make people feel isolated and withdrawn from others and lacking in social support. So it can fundamentally alter the way they view themselves, as well as themselves in relation to other people and their place in the world. And that can link to mental health effects like anxiety, depression, self-harming behaviors, and also maladaptive coping strategies through behaviors like substance abuse. And another long-term consequence is the effects on education and careers. So an inability to concentrate might be one of the outcomes. And of course, that has implications on education, absenteeism, high dropout rates.
And it's not just bullying, is it, that causes young people to be depressed? Just the act of going on social media can be damaging. I'm thinking of sort of comparing your life with somebody else's, or fear of missing out, as it's called.
Some social media, like social networking sites, they do allow us to present essentially a highlight reel of our lives with our best images, the holidays we've been on, all of our achievements. And that can make it seem as if everybody
is having a better time than you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So everybody's life is more exciting and happier. And so if you fail to take into consideration the information sharing on social media and how that occurs in the context of self-presentation and impression management, and how that might be quite different to the lived day-to-day reality of that person, then you can get into that cycle of constant upward comparison, and that could lead you to become depressed. So we need to be more mindful.
Is there a gender difference here, Maša? Do girls get a rougher deal than boys?
Girls are more likely to have behaviors perpetrated against them that are sort of trying to damage their reputation. So, for example, sharing embarrassing photos or having rumors spread about them online. And some types of harassment are gendered. For example, things like revenge porn and sharing of nude images, that is a gendered issue. But in terms of overall prevalence rates, it seems that it affects a wide population. And so those demographic differences may not be as pronounced if we look at the issue overall.
And how has cyberbullying evolved since the early days of MSN Messenger or chat rooms in the early noughties?
I mean, it's evolved considerably, just the number of platforms, the features, and how easy it is to share information and content very rapidly, also to generate your own content, and the number of users. It's become so popular now compared to that time. And what that means for cyberbullying is that situations can escalate out of control very, very quickly through distribution of content. And so it's the sheer publicity and the size of the audience that makes it concerning, because it means that images or information about you can be shared beyond your school or your work or your neighborhood or even the country you live in.
Would it help if a government or there was regulation that said you cannot go online anonymously?
I mean, that's one of the questions that have been put out, a lot of debates in this area about what to do exactly, and, you know, whose responsibility is it to do what? So where does a parent's or a teacher's responsibility begin and end? And when does it become a problem that social media providers need to do? And so I don't think we've got the boundaries mapped out very neatly, and that's one of the problems.
Dr. Maša Popovac, many thanks to you for joining us here on The Agenda.
Thank you.
Being separated from friends and family during lockdown meant relying increasingly on social media to stay informed and connected. But as restrictions lift, how easy will it be to shake off our consumption and sometimes our obsession with sharing our thoughts and views online? When England's football team suffered racist abuse on Twitter during the Euros, many people asked why it was so difficult to track down racist trolls and remove the hateful messages. The entire saga reminded us just how easy it is to abuse but stay anonymous. And it's not just trolling that is a concern. Experts fear that our brains have been rewired for instant gratification, causing us to lack focus. Attention spans have shortened by sites designed to hold our attention with short, concise videos and posts, and the constant refreshing of new content. It's deliberate, because for big tech, more attention means more users, more shares, more likes, more posts, which all results in more profit from our data. Social media can be a fantastic tool for uniting people during troubling times. It can also cause division and long-lasting harm. At times like these, connection is more important than ever, but it's time to reassess whether or not social media is the right way to do it. In future, social media may become increasingly controlled, more heavily moderated, less toxic, and possibly more boring. As a result, it may also become less profitable for the platforms themselves, which thrive on constant engagement and the resharing of provocative or controversial material. And that could trigger a readjustment or realigning of social media and the big tech giants behind it. Don't forget you can watch everything from past Agenda episodes and find additional exclusive content on our website, cgtn.com/Europe, or on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at CGTN Europe. Coming up on a future agenda. As digital banking and mobile apps continue to replace high street banks, we look at who will dominate the future of fintech. But for now, from me, Stephen Cole, and all the Agenda team here in London, it's goodbye.